We are opening the file on one of history's most confounding cold cases today. We are undertaking a deep dive into the final, terrifying days of Edgar Allan Poe.
It really is a profound historical paradox, isn't it? Here's an inner who basically invented the modern detective story with 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 Dupin. You know, the careful logic, the forensic detail.
Like finding the solution in things others missed.
Exactly. And yet his own death, it's just shrouded in myth, really unreliable testimony, and that baffling 5-day black hole where he just disappears.
Absolutely. And the scene itself is just, it's pure Poe, almost. You've got this world-famous writer found delirious in a Baltimore gutter.
Wearing clothes that weren't his, cheap clothes.
Secondhand clothes, yeah. And 5 days of his life are just completely erased. Then he dies 4 days later in hospital, tormented by hallucinations, whispering this one name, Reynolds.
It's an absolute maze of information, and frankly, it's made worse by deliberate historical attacks on his character.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to sort of conduct the investigation Poe himself would have demanded.
We're going to strip away, well, 170 years of myth, rumor, and some outright lies, a lot planted by a very nasty rival, actually, and focus only on the evidence from the time. We want to figure out the most plausible cause of Poe's sudden awful death.
Okay, let's start by tackling the big myth right away, because I think this is absolutely key to understanding the tragedy.
Yeah.
The popular story, the one everyone kind of knows, paints Poe as this, drunken poet stumbling toward doom.
Right, the self-destructive genius narrative.
Exactly. But based on the evidence from 1849, that image, it seems demonstrably false.
It's a historical caricature, really. It serves that narrative of, well, inevitable self-destruction. But the truth is, Poe had spent the previous couple of years really grappling with losing his young wife, Virginia.
His cousin.
His wife and cousin, yes. He admitted in letters that her long illness, he called it that horrible never-ending oscillation between hope and despair, that's what drove him to his worst drinking spells. It sometimes pushed him close to, well, mental collapse.
But by the summer of 1849, things had turned around. He wasn't falling apart. He was actively, very publicly, rebuilding his life.
From the ashes, as they say. Yeah. He had this detailed plan, actually. 3 pillars, you could call them, all focused on stability and, importantly, solvency.
So, pillar number 1, professional ambition.
A powerful professional ambition. Poe was one of the very first American writers really determined to make a living just from writing, which back then...
almost impossible financially.
Pretty much, yeah. He'd struggled constantly, filed for bankruptcy back in 1842. His big dream, the thing he was obsessed with, was finally launching his own literary magazine, The Stylus.
And this wasn't just some side project. This was his path to financial independence, right? Something he'd chased his whole career.
Absolutely. And that lecture tour he was on that summer, traveling around, that was basically fundraising for The Stylus. High-profile fundraising.
And in Richmond, his hometown, it was a huge success.
Oh, a massive success. A real triumph. He lectured on the poetic principle at the Exchange Hotel. The place was packed. The crowds were enthusiastic.
The papers loved him.
They did. Hailed him as a native of this city. Reviews called the lecture one of the richest intellectual treats. He was a star there. He recited The Raven, got thunderous applause. Professionally, things were really looking up. His life's work seemed within reach.
Okay, so pillar 2, personal stability. And this one seems tied directly to his recovery efforts.
Very much so. He rekindled a romance with his first love, Sarah Elmira Royster Shilton.
Who is now a wealthy widow.
Right. And things moved fast. They got engaged, planned to marry quite soon.
But it wasn't straightforward, was it? There were complications.
Big complications.
Yeah.
Elmira's kids did not approve of Poe, given his reputation. And crucially, her late husband's will. It said if she remarried, she'd lose 3/4 of her inheritance, a substantial amount.
Wow, okay.
Poe knew this. So securing that marriage meant security, yes, but it absolutely required him to appear completely reformed, reliable, stable.
Which brings us neatly to pillar 3, his health, specifically sobriety.
The most critical pillar, really. We know Poe's relationship with alcohol was, well, disastrous. And it was made worse by this apparently very rare physiological thing, an incredibly low tolerance.
Right. Friends said even one glass of wine could make him seem completely drunk.
Incapacitated, yeah. So even a little bit was dangerous for him. To get his finances sorted, to secure this marriage, he had to prove he was sober. For good.
And he did something very public about it.
He did. A formal, recorded step. In July 1849, just weeks before he died, he officially joined the 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 Division, number 54, of the Sons of Temperance in Richmond.
For listeners who might not know, the Sons of Temperance wasn't just like a social club, was it?
Oh, no, not at all. It was a powerful organization, almost religious in its fervor, a fraternal order dedicated to total abstinence. Taking that pledge was a big deal.
So what did that public oath really mean for Poe in 1849?
It meant everything. It was a social contract, a moral statement. He was making a public sworn promise. And that was vital to convince Elmira and Richmond society, frankly, that he was reliable, that he was worthy of marrying her.
And he took it seriously.
Apparently very seriously. The head of the division noted Poe took the oath with unusual firmness. And the fact that his friends, after his death, were so convinced he'd kept the pledge that they investigated. That tells you how serious they thought he was.
They saw his sobriety as proof of his reform.
Ironclad proof. Proof of his commitment to this future he'd planned out.
So looking at Richmond, Poe wasn't drifting, he was focused. He had a plan. Professional success, personal stability, proven sobriety.
Exactly. He had every reason to believe he was going to achieve that future.
Which just makes his sudden disappearance well, horrifying and even more disturbing.
Because it argues against the idea he just slipped back into old habits. Something else, something sudden and external must have happened.
Okay, so the journey into that 5-day void starts September 26th, 27th, 1849. This is the last time we see him clearly as this man with a plan. And his fiancée, Elmira Shelton, gives us the first really crucial warning sign. She remembered he was very sad, complaining of being quite sick.
Noted his fever, weak pulse, so he was already unwell when he left.
Physically compromised, yeah, but still determined. His plan was clear. Get a steamer to Baltimore.
Connect to a train to Philadelphia for some editing work he had lined up.
And then head up to New York to get his mother-in-law, Maria Clem, who he adored.
He was still following the plan, even though he felt sick.
And then we get this first really weird detail. The cane.
Ah, yes, the Malacca cane.
He visits a friend, Dr. John Carter, and somehow mistakenly takes Carter's cane, which had a hidden sword inside, and leaves his own cane behind.
It's a small detail, but strange. This fancy cane, a walking stick with a concealed blade, ends up being found with him later in Baltimore.
Taking the wrong one. Does it suggest he was distracted, hurried, maybe feeling the fever?
Could be any of those things. Hard to say for sure. But he boards the steamer for Baltimore at 4 a.m. September 27th, sails off, arrives sometime on the 28th, and then, poof, he vanishes.
This is it. The 5-day black hole. September 28th to October 3rd. He gets to Baltimore. His cousin, Nielsen Poe, a respected lawyer, lives there.
But Poe never contacts him, never shows up.
He never makes it to the train station for that connection to Philadelphia either.
There is simply no verified information about where he was or what he did for those 5 days.
Okay.
Nielsen Poe himself wrote later he was completely unable to ascertain where Edgar spent the time or, under what circumstances.
Total void.
A complete blank. There's one really wild, totally unverified story.
About hiding out.
Yeah, that he hid in disguise in Philly because Elmira's brothers threatened him.
Yep.
But there's zero evidence for that. Poe scholars pretty much dismiss it. The reality is he just vanished off the map until he reappears under the most shocking circumstance.
The reappearance. October 3rd, 1849. And the timing, this specific day, is absolutely critical.
It's Election Day in Baltimore.
And 19th century Baltimore elections weren't quiet affairs.
Not even close. They were notorious, deeply corrupt, often violent, voter intimidation, fraud. These weren't rare things. They were basically standard practice.
A blood sport, someone called it.
Literally. And the location where he's found, Gunners Hall, a public house on East Lombard Street.
And the key detail here is...
Gunners Hall was a known, established polling place for the Whig Party, right at the center of all that political chaos and, often violence.
So who finds him?
A man named Joseph W. Walker. He was a compositor for the Baltimore Sun. Walker finds Poe either lying in the gutter or on the steps.
Recognizable, but in a terrible state.
Exactly. Delirious, barely conscious, couldn't move.
And Walker writes a note, doesn't he? This is the first piece of direct evidence from the scene.
Invaluable. He writes to Dr. Snodgrass, we'll get to him, saying, "There is a gentleman, rather the worse for wear, and who appears in great distress," and he says he's E.A. Poe.
Oh, gentleman, in great distress.
That phrasing is so important. Walker's just an observer, no agenda. He emphasizes the suffering, the distress, not just, here's a drunk guy.
He saw him as a gentleman, despite the state he was in.
Which immediately shifts the focus, doesn't it? From just assuming drunk poet to thinking victim in distress.
So if we're building a case, the first clues are A famous man found in agony on a very dangerous day at a very specific, politically charged location.
Precisely. The environment itself, the election chaos, the known criminal activity around the polls, it just screams that we need to look beyond the simplest, most convenient explanation.
Okay, so Dr. Snodgrass arrives. And the next big clue, maybe the most shocking one, is the clothing.
Yeah, this is huge. Poe was known for being incredibly meticulous about his appearance. Fastidious, always neat, clean, even if his clothes were old or patched.
What he was found wearing was the exact opposite, like a costume of degradation.
It's horrific, really, when you compare it to how he normally looked. Snodgrass and the doctor at the hospital documented it. The hat. A rusty, almost brimless, tattered, and ribbonless palm leaf hat.
A cheap straw summer hat.
In October. Exactly. The coat. A thin sack coat. Sleazy, black alpaca, ripped at several seams. Faded. Dirty. Alpaca was cheap, thin stuff. Totally wrong for a cool Baltimore autumn day.
And the pants.
Steel mix pattern of 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏, another cheap fabric, half-worn and badly fitting. And maybe the most telling part.
No vest, no neckcloth.
Right. The absolute basics of how a gentleman would dress back then, gone.
So this is the central physical mystery here. The clothes are cheap, filthy, don't fit, and they belong to someone else.
Yes, that's the key. If you get mugged, the thief takes your good stuff, maybe leaves you in your own torn clothes.
They don't usually perform a full wardrobe swap, giving you worse clothes.
Exactly. So the question just hangs there. Why was he wearing someone else's rags? Was it just robbery, or was it some kind of sinister disguise?
Poe gets rushed to Washington College Hospital, which, ironically, was the teaching hospital for the school where he'd lectured not long before.
Poetic irony, yeah. He's put in a tower room, basically a cell. Barred windows, reserved for drunkards and the destitute.
And his doctor there is a young resident, Dr. John J. Moran.
Very young. And because Poe was so delirious, so agitated, Moran refused all visitors, even Nielsen Poe, the cousin who showed up with a fresh change of clothes for Edgar.
So Moran becomes the bottleneck for information.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
For the last 4 days of Poe's life, Dr. Moran is our only witness. And, well, his story gets complicated. His testimony is frankly contaminated by his own ambition later on.
But based on what Moran initially reported, we can piece together those awful final days, Poe's drifting in and out of consciousness.
When awake, his answers were incoherent and unsatisfactory. He was having terrifying hallucinations.
Talking to things on the walls.
Vacant converse with spectral and imaginary objects, Moran said. And the physical distress was extreme, constantly sweating.
Drenched in perspiration.
Violent tremors. And this detail, great difficulty drinking water, which could suggest severe throat spasms or muscle issues.
And then on that final night, repeating that name over and over, Reynolds.
For hours, apparently. Reynolds. Reynolds. Who was Reynolds? A political figure. Someone he knew? Maybe just a name plucked from delirium? We don't know.
Okay, so let's put Dr. Moran under the microscope, because this is where the historical record gets really muddy. Why did his accounts change so much over time, become more dramatic?
Well, it seems pretty clear Moran realized he was connected to a famous death, and he tried to leverage it for his own fame. He's the definition of an unreliable narrator.
The alcohol question is the big one.
The most glaring contradiction, yeah. Later on, in public lectures and writings, Moran insisted Poe had not the slightest odor of liquor. He seemed keen to clear Poe's name, maybe appeal to the temperance folks.
If he really smelled no alcohol, why did his first letter, written right after Poe died, to Poe's mother-in-law, Maria Clem, why did he use the word malady?
Because malady back then was a very common, polite euphemism for alcoholism, especially when you're writing to a close family member about a sensitive subject.
So he knew the reputation.
Oh, he definitely knew. He wasn't ready to flat out contradict it right away. The story changed later when he was trying to make a name for himself.
And it wasn't just the alcohol story that changed?
No, the factual discrepancies kept mounting. He gave, I think, 3 different dates and times for when Poe was actually admitted to the hospital.
And claimed he was checking hospital records?
For records that no historian has ever found, they probably never existed.
And the last words? That changed too.
Dramatically. In 1849, Moran reported Poe's last words as the simple, desperate plea. Lord, help my poor soul.
Okay.
By 1875, in his memoirs, it had transformed into this ridiculously over-the-top poetic speech about the arched heavens and God's will.
Oh, come on.
It's laughably grandiose.
Yeah.
A clear fabrication to make Moran seem like he witnessed this profound theatrical deathbed scene.
So, Poe dies. 5 a.m. October 7th. Official cause of death. Phrenitis or congestion of the brain. What does that actually tell us, medically speaking, from that time?
Almost nothing useful, sadly. Phrenitis just means brain inflammation. Congestion of the brain is just as vague.
It was a catch-all term.
Completely.
Okay.
Could mean a stroke, meningitis, a head injury like a subdural hematoma from a beating, or, yes, it could mean the effects of severe alcoholism.
So the diagnosis itself is a dead end.
Pretty much. It tells us his brain was distressed, but not why. We have to rely on the circumstances, the clothes, the location, the symptoms.
Right, so given the unreliable witness and the vague diagnosis, we have to look at the theories that best fit the actual evidence we do have.
Exactly.
And the one that seems to have the strongest historical backing is tied directly to that Election Day chaos in Baltimore.
This is the Cooping theory. And it sounds awful, but it was a real documented practice for election fraud back then.
How did it work?
Political gangs, these Coopers, they'd literally kidnap people. Often strangers, people just passing through town who wouldn't be missed right away.
Yeah.
They'd hold them captive, maybe in a basement or a locked room, the coop. Then they'd drug them heavily, usually with laudanum, and force-feed them massive amounts of alcohol to make them compliant.
Why? Just to keep them quiet?
To control them, and crucially, to disguise them. They'd often beat the victims, too, to make sure they obeyed. Then they'd change the victims' clothes.
The cool.
Exactly. They'd swap their clothes for cheap disguises, then drag these poor, drugged, beaten, confused souls from polling place to polling place.
Forcing them to vote multiple times under different names.
Yes. And once the polls close, they'd just dump the victims somewhere, often half dead.
And this is where the evidence for Poe seems to just click into place, doesn't it?
It aligns remarkably well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's kick the boxes.
That
Timing, location. Found October 3rd, Election Day, right at Gunners Hall. A known Whig polling station. Check. The cheap, ill-fitting rags, definitely not his own. Perfect match for the practice of disguising victims to vote repeatedly. A mugger doesn't swap clothes. A Cooping gang has to. Check.
condition.
Delirium, fever, semi-conscious, hallucinations. All consistent with being drugged, probably beaten, and critically forced to drink a lot of alcohol.
Which, for Poe, with his low tolerance.
Would have been catastrophic.
Yes.
Instantly overwhelming. Check. It fits all the key physical and circumstantial points.
And this wasn't some wild guess people made later. This was apparently the common belief in Baltimore at the time he died.
That's right. People living there understood how these gangs operated. There are accounts in the 1870s, like one from a Johns Hopkins faculty member, William Hand Brown.
What did he say?
He confirmed that the general belief here is that Poe was seized by one of these gangs, cooped, stupefied with liquor, dragged out and voted, and then turned adrift. The local consensus pointed straight in Cooping.
So why didn't that theory become the main story if people there believed it?
Well, it's messy, isn't it? It implicates the city's political system, suggests widespread corruption and violence. The other theory was much simpler, much more sensational.
And pushed by someone with an agenda.
Exactly. The idea that the troubled genius just drank himself into the gutter was easier, and it didn't require looking too closely at how Baltimore politics actually worked.
Right, so let's look at that alcoholism theory. It's dominated for so long, partly because it taps into Poe's known struggles.
His history of abuse, yeah. Plus, you had temperance advocates like Snodgrass, eager to use him as an example, and then the huge malicious push from his rival, Griswold.
It's a simple narrative, but it has big problems.
Massive flaws, really. Like we said, it completely fails to explain the 5 missing days. Where was he? Why the relapse then? And critically, it doesn't explain the clothes. Why someone else's rags?
It ignores that very public, very recent pledge to the Sons of Temperance.
A pledge his friends genuinely believed he was keeping. They were shocked by the idea he'd broken it.
But maybe the strongest argument against it now comes from modern science, the hair analysis.
This is fascinating stuff. Forensic science, reaching back almost 2 centuries, they analyzed samples of Poe's preserved hair for heavy metals.
Why heavy metals?
Because back in the 1840s, cheap alcohol, the kind someone on a binge might drink, was often contaminated. The brewing equipment, lead pipes, copper stills, they leached lead and other metals into the spirits.
So if he'd been drinking heavily for months or even weeks leading up to his death.
His hair would show high levels of lead. It acts like a timeline of consumption.
And what did Poe's hair show?
Low lead levels,
Yeah.
significantly low, which strongly suggests he was not drinking heavily in those final months.
Wow. So the science backs up the idea he likely kept his vow.
It really does. It argues powerfully against a slow relapse into alcoholism being the cause. It makes the idea that any alcohol involved was forced on him suddenly in that Baltimore disappearance window much more plausible.
Okay, let's set aside the violence and the myth for a second. Could his symptoms just be from a sudden natural illness? Modern doctors have looked at his case file, essentially.
They have. And one theory that comes up is medically very compelling. Rabies.
Rabies. Right.
Proposed by a cardiologist, Dr. Michael Benitez. If you just look at the symptoms Moran described, ignoring the circumstances for a moment, the match is remarkable.
How so?
The timeline fits. About 4 days from the onset of acute symptoms to death. The cycles of confusion mixed with lucid moments, the terrifying hallucinations, the tremors.
And that difficulty drinking water Moran mentioned.
That could be hydrophobia, the fear of water. It's a classic rabies symptom, caused by incredibly painful throat spasms when trying to swallow. That symptom alone makes rabies a serious contender, medically speaking.
So why isn't it the leading theory? What's missing?
The obvious thing, a recorded animal bite. We have no record, no mention from Poe or anyone else that he was bitten by a rabid animal.
But could he have been bitten and not realized it or not mentioned it?
Absolutely. Rabies transmission can happen from a small scratch, maybe from a bat, that goes unnoticed or unreported. Many victims don't recall the exposure. So while we lack that direct evidence of a bite, the symptoms fit eerily well. It's a chilling possibility.
Then there's the brain tumor theory. This one feels a bit more like folklore, doesn't it? Stemming from that weird story during the 1875 exhumation.
Yeah, the workers claiming they heard something hard rattling in his skull.
Like his brain had shrunk and hardened.
Which sounds bizarre, but forensic experts say a brain tumor can calcify after death. A hard calcified mass or lesion that could definitely cause chronic neurological issues, the delirium, the confusion.
And wasn't there an earlier hint of this?
There was. One of Poe's own physicians had apparently suspected he might have a lesion on the brain years earlier, so it's not entirely out of left field, maybe not the acute cause of death, but potentially a contributing factor to his state.
And the simplest natural cause, influenza, pneumonia.
Entirely possible. We know he was already sick leaving Richmond fever, weak pulse, travel, exposure, maybe bad weather in Baltimore.
Could easily turn into a serious infection.
Right, and a severe infection like pneumonia or influenza can absolutely cause high fever, leading to the kind of delirium and confusion Moran described. It's a plausible medical explanation for the symptoms.
But again, it doesn't explain the missing 5 days or the clothes.
Exactly. Those crucial circumstantial pieces remain unaccounted for by purely natural illness theories.
Okay, so even if we separate it from the organized Cooping scenario, the evidence still points towards violence, doesn't it? The clothes, the diagnosis. Could it have been a simpler case of foul play? Just a mugging gone wrong?
Absolutely. A straightforward beating or robbery could easily cause a traumatic brain injury. A subdural hematoma, for instance.
Which would fit the congestion of the brain diagnosis.
Perfectly. And it would explain the neurological symptoms Moran saw. This often gets rolled into the Cooping theory, the beating being part of controlling the victim. But it could have just been a random act of violence by common criminals.
But the more elaborate theories, like his fiance's brothers murdering him over the inheritance.
Pure speculation. There's no direct evidence whatsoever for those kinds of targeted attacks or conspiracies. Most scholars dismiss them.
So if it was foul play, it was likely random, localized violence.
That's where the evidence points. Whether that violence was politically motivated, like in Cooping, or just straightforward street crime, the result, severe trauma, possibly combined with forced intoxication, seems the most likely trigger for his rapid decline.
You really can't wrap this up without talking about the deliberate sabotage of Poe's reputation that happened immediately after his death. It clouded everything for so long.
It's one of the most malicious acts in literary history, frankly. The character assassination began almost instantly. Just 2 days after Poe died, his literary rival, and the terrible irony, the man Poe himself chose as his literary executor, Rufus Wilmot Griswold.
What did he do?
He published this absolutely scathing obituary in the New York Tribune. He used a pseudonym, Ludwig, but people knew it was him. And the opening line is just unbelievably cruel.
What was it?
This announcement will startle many, but few will be grieved by it.
Wow, 2 days after the man died.
And Griswold didn't stop there. He used his position as executor, a position of trust, to publish a biographical memoir of Poe.
Which was filled with lies.
Filled with half-truths, twisted quotes, and outright fabrications. He claimed Poe got expelled from university for drinking and gambling, false. Claimed he deserted the army, false.
Why? What was his goal?
To destroy Poe's reputation. He systematically created this enduring caricature. the depraved, immoral, friendless drunkard. His motive was probably jealousy, and also ensuring that people bought his edition of Poe's works, which included this biographical hatchet job. He profited from the slander.
And it worked. He basically poisoned the well for a century.
He absolutely did. He created a public perception that made the alcoholism theory seem plausible, even inevitable. People were conditioned to believe Poe was the kind of man Griswold described, capable of drinking himself to death in a gutter.
So if we strip away Griswold's lies and we account for Moran's unreliable, self-serving testimony, what does the actual evidence tell us?
It tells us that, okay, no single theory is 100% provable. This is still a 170-year-old cold case. There are gaps we can't fill.
But the weight of the evidence, where does it fall?
For me and for many modern scholars, it points overwhelmingly towards the Cooping theory, because it's the only explanation that neatly ties together the three biggest anomalies. The election day timing, the specific polling place location, and those bizarre swapped clothes.
The clothes are the smoking gun for Cooping.
They really are.
Yeah.
They're direct physical evidence that fits the known practice of disguising victims.
Sure.
So his death was likely the result of a violent criminal act connected to political corruption.
Not a slow slide into self-destruction.
No. Whether the final blow was a head injury from a beating, or the effects of alcohol forced on him, or a combination, the origin appears to be a sudden, external, criminal event, a kidnapping and exploitation.
And the final sad coda to his life, his funeral.
Just crushingly pathetic. Fewer than 10 people attended. He was buried in an unmarked grave initially. Later, just a simple sandstone block with the number 8 on it.
And didn't something happen to the headstone the family commissioned?
Unbelievably, yes. The marble headstone they ordered was sitting at the monument dealer's yard waiting to be installed when a freight train derailed, jumped the tracks, and smashed right into the yard, destroying the headstone.
You couldn't make it up.
It's like the universe itself was conspiring against his memory for a while. Griswold's toxic caricature lived on, overshadowing the real man.
The focused artist, the struggling writer who was actually on the verge of getting the stability he'd always wanted.
Exactly. A future that was violently stolen from him, lost in the crime and chaos of a 19th century American city. #tag outro.
You know, Edgar Allan Poe's stories gave us these intricate puzzles, mysteries that 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏 could solve with logic and reason.
Yeah, puzzles with solutions.
But his own death left us with a mystery rooted not in literary genius, but in, well, political corruption, physical violence, and as we've seen, a deliberate campaign of historical slander. He remains one of literature's great unsolved cases and one of its most tragic victims.
And if you think about the wider implications,
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If someone as famous, as recognizable as Edgar Allan Poe could just be snatched off the street, drugged, disguised in cheap clothes, used and abandoned, basically swallowed up by the violence and anonymity of a big city back then.
What does that say about all the truly anonymous victims? The countless people lost to crime, to history, whose names we don't even know.
Exactly. Who else's stories out there, buried under layers of myth or just forgotten, whose truth is waiting to be uncovered if we just dig a little deeper past the easy answers?
Something to think about. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
And so, another chapter closes. For more journeys into history's forgotten files, please like and subscribe. Your next story awaits.